Hello and welcome to Doug's Front Porch, a podcast where I get to sit down with friends, old and new, and have honest conversations. I am so excited today to welcome Molly Smith to the front porch, a friend who I've known for, I was thinking about this, Molly, probably about 20 years now since I first met you.
Wow.
Yeah, how about it? And I'm just so happy that you agreed to come on and welcome to the front porch.
Thanks so much, Doug. I am so excited to be here virtually.
Virtually, yeah. We got quite a bit of a distance between us. Molly is up in Vermont, and we'll talk more about that here throughout the interview. But I want to start with some questions. So you don't know what's coming at you, Molly, and we'll just play it that way as the conversation goes. But I'm going to start with this. You grew up not having what most Americans would consider a normal childhood. And I'll let you explain why it wasn't necessarily the quintessential normal childhood. Let's start with that. How was your childhood, in your eyes, different from the average American child?
Wow, that is a great question. And let me be clear. I grew up knowing that my childhood wasn't as I guess as common as others. So I think probably the most different thing about my upbringing was I was homeschooled. And I was homeschooled for reasons that were not typical of other homeschoolers in my small town in Pennsylvania. Um, my sister and I, starting in, I guess, let's see, I was in first grade and she was coming into second. We had just moved to Pennsylvania from Indiana. And because of the way the school systems were set up, the school wanted to keep my sister back a year so that she would be entering into third grade with people of her own age and her own age cohort. And my mother was not happy with that, given that my sister was reading at a much higher level and she wanted my sister to advance. So my mother decided to pull us out of public school and she homeschooled us herself. And so that was kind of the first way that I knew that we were different, is that we were homeschooled. We didn't get up at 7 and get on the school bus and go to school. The other big thing that I knew that made us different, and this ties into the homeschooling. We went to a homeschool group, a whole group of other children in our area who were also homeschooled. And they were all homeschooled for predominantly religious reasons. There were a lot of Mennonite families, very religiously conservative. And I mean, my dad taught evolution and biology at the local university. I am half Jewish, I'm half Unitarian. I read Harry Potter. I wore a peace sign necklace. So we didn't exactly fit in that homeschool group. So even among other kids who were homeschooling, my sister and I still didn't fit in. And then I guess the last way, we grew up on a farm. We had around 200 animals, and every day in the morning it was chores time, then it was schoolwork time, second round of chores time. We didn't have a television. We didn't get high speed internet until I was a teenager. So, yeah, my childhood was kind of lonely, I guess. I grew up without a ton of friends, lots of animals, very close family, but yeah, not the stereotypical childhood, I would say.
There's Yeah, there's so much we could talk about there, but the one thing that since I've known you for so long, I know for a fact that even though you mentioned you didn't grow up with a lot of other people your own age around you, and you felt lonely at times, but I think that you were able to socially adapt much better than a lot of other homeschool children that I have had the pleasure of meeting. There are stereotypes about homeschool kids,
There sure
and you're
are.
oh, absolutely. They're awkward.
Hmm.
They might be highly intelligent, but they don't know how to handle themselves, how to carry themselves
Yep.
in public.
Oh, I got that a
And
lot.
oh, but I never saw that with you and your sister. And I think that plays a lot to both who you two are, but also to the role that your parents played in that education
Yes,
as you were growing up.
absolutely. So my first of all, my mother, Joanna, would read to my sister and I every single night. We read through all types of young adult series. We read all of the Swallows and Amazons, The Lord of the Rings. We read Children of Green Snow, all these fantastic books. And those helped in a way us not feel quite so isolated. We read about friendships, about relationships. And then my father was a professor at the local university, as Doug knows, and he would occasionally bring home to dinner a student that was just a little different. The student would be just a bit brighter than the rest, a bit more engaged. And Doug was one of those students, and we got to know these students became our friends, and they really connected us with the outside world, I guess you would put it. And as we got older, we were also eventually allowed. We would watch like educational movies and things like that, which helped us socialize. But I would not say that once I did go to college, that the process of learning how to make friends was easy, because it was
Ooh, we'll come back to that, but I
not.
do wanna aside, I thanks for dropping a little bit of the story of how I got to meet your family.
Yeah.
But on a previous episode, I was interviewing, we were talking about how people in our lives that made major changes, to us as people, and both of us agreed, in stories and anecdotes that it was a one professor that turned my one friend's life in a totally different direction that he ever expected it to go. And I had two professors in college that kind of did the same thing for me. Maybe not turned my life in a different direction, but had me look at life in a different way. And your father was absolutely one of them. It was one of the few. He was one of the few professors. And here was a German major and a history major, but I had to take a bio class because it was part of gen ed requirements or whatever. And I never liked science. I still don't really. I mean, I enjoy science and I appreciate it, but I never had that desire to do science like I had for languages or history, for example. But your dad somehow honed in on a different side of me that maybe I didn't even know I had or whatever, and put me on a road to looking at things a little bit differently than how I was especially used to looking at things. And what was really neat was then as I got to know him and your family, I grew up on a farm, so we had that connection of agricultural backgrounds, and we quickly realized that we did have a lot of other things in common.
Hmm.
And out of it has blossomed a 20-year relationship that I hope goes on for another forever.
Oh yeah.
Um, but let me come back to some of the things you said in regards to your childhood, and we do want to talk about your journey to college and things like that. But
Yeah.
looking back on it now that you've been away from being a teenager and all that for a couple years, there's that distance now. What do you see as some of the benefits of being raised the way that you were, but also what might be one or two drawbacks that you've realized into how you were
Hmm.
raised?
I would say I was very lonely as a child. I did have an older sister, but I do have an older sister, but she and I are very dissimilar. We love each other very much and we support each other, but we didn't interact and play in the same way, I would say. So I think that being on the farm and homeschooled left me incredibly lonely. Um, and as a result, I didn't really know how to make healthy friendships when I finally went to college. So I think the biggest drawback is definitely not um, knowing what made a good friendship and
Okay.
knowing what was healthy in a friendship. That's probably something that I would have learned in, I don't know, middle school or even high school. And kind of the whole high school experience, I didn't get any of that. And I imagine being I moved to, well, we'll get into that, but I moved up to college a year early. And so take this like naive farm girl, homeschooled middle of nowhere, and drop her into a college town. That's a pretty traumatic experience. But the benefits, I would say, totally outweighed some of the hardships. I have and continue to have a very close and wonderful relationship with my parents. I continue to have a very close and loving relationship with the earth, with agriculture. It inspired me into my current career path to be able to spend so much time learning about the earth, cultivating crops on a farm, raising animals, gave me a really healthy respect for my environment. And I also think that growing up so isolated, it gave me a lot of resilience and a lot of persistence. Because being that sort of that outcast, and there were some times when I was told that I was weird and not normal and was ostracized or teased or bullied by people that I did come into contact with. And um, but I was able, through the support of my family and just the grit that you get when you grow up
Uh-huh.
on a farm, to persist. So I'm really grateful for that. Also, responsibility, as my father would say. Being on a farm and all of that taught me a tremendous amount of responsibility, self control, and self pacing. I will say, Doug, that
Yeah.
because I was homeschooled, I had to learn how to pace myself when it came to my schoolwork. And so I am extremely proud that when I got to college, I never turned in an assignment late. I never did an all nighter. I was very strict when it came to my schoolwork, and I really
Right, yeah.
respect my schoolwork.
I agree. There's a you have a lot to be proud of, to be honest. But growing up on a farm, for me, it was the same way. The one thing that all the things you mentioned, a connection to the earth, an understanding of responsibility, but
Oh yeah.
time management and grit are
Hmm.
the two things I think that were the most beneficial for me growing up in that agricultural setting that affected who I am today and my transition to college. I was also one of the few students, it seemed like, at least for the people that I was talking to, that was handing things in on time, that was
Yeah.
keeping caught up in their studies, was even going ahead, like planning ahead a little bit, where a lot of the people that I knew were not doing that. And
Yeah.
it has to be that background, growing up the way that I did and the way that we did, I guess.
Yeah, being farmers, being good farmers means that you have to be able to plan ahead. You have to be prepared in
Yeah.
all things. And
Yeah, and you have to be prepared for anything to break at any
yeah,
time,
exactly.
or for the plan to go not as planned, I
Yes.
guess we should say.
Yes.
All right, well, let's make that transition. So you left home and went to Cornell,
Hmm.
and you did your undergraduate. What was your undergraduate in at Cornell?
So I was a double major in plant science and natural resources, and I had a minor in viticulture and enology.
Did you know going in as a freshman that that's what you wanted to do, or was it a major that or were they majors that you stumbled upon?
I had no idea. I mean, when I was 10 years old, I desperately wanted to be a chef. I loved baking. I loved cooking. I started taking college classes when I was 14 so that I could go to a cooking school. I worked so hard, graduated high school early just so that I could go to cooking school, and then went to go work in a restaurant for a few months. And that dream died
Yeah, how
really
about it?
fast after working as a dishwasher for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Um, so I ended up moving up to Ithaca, taking a couple of classes at Cornell just as an extramural student. And when I entered in as a freshman, I was at the time, I just went with what I knew. So I was an agricultural studies major. And then, in the same way that you and I have this shared experience of, there was one professor who just sort of changed the course of everything. And for me, that professor was Dr. Harry Green. He's a herpetologist over at Cornell. He's now retired. But I took his basic biology class, and he was very focused on ecology, and it just all felt right and clicked. I'd had this really strong relationship to nature and to the earth as I was growing up. So that's when I decided I was going to declare a natural resources major and study sustainability and the environment and ecology. It wasn't until my junior year that I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do with a degree in the environment? So I thought, well, maybe I should get another degree in plant science. That seems like a great idea. Um, and then the viticulture and enology just sort of fell into that because I love making wine, and it was like the fun part. So I studied things that I loved because I realized that my college education, for me anyway, given my homeschooling upbringing, wasn't as much about becoming or like learning a career. It was about learning how to be an adult and learning how to
Mm.
learn. And I think Cornell was really the perfect environment for me to do that because I grew up more in those 4 years than maybe I have since. No, that's not true. But they were very informative 4 years. And I'm not now doing anything in the viticulture field or the plant science field, but it taught me how to grow up. That's for sure.
But it also set your foundation
Oh,
too.
sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So you left Cornell, then what
Yep.
happens?
So, wow. Okay. I left Cornell and I ended up moving to New Hampshire with now an ex boyfriend and got a couple jobs. I was teaching swimming lessons. I was working on an organic farm. I was doing what my father likes to call luffing, which is what happens when you've got a sailboat in calm water. Like the sails are up, it's just waiting for that puff of breeze, but nothing's happening. So I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I had been practicing yoga since I was 14 years old, and I had the opportunity to go to yoga school in New Hampshire. So I did that for a year, became a certified yoga instructor. And during that time, I decided that my next course of action was to go to graduate school. And I had been in this yoga program where we had been exploring sort of the human spirit and the wholeness of being a human. And I found that that connection between human resilience fit really nicely into what the environment was going through. And it fit beautifully in with my undergraduate work. And so I decided to seek a graduate degree in sustainability and environmental management. So I applied and was accepted to Harvard Extension School, which was fantastic because I was able to work full time while in school. So I did my graduate program part time and worked full time in a variety of jobs for the next 3 years while I worked on my graduate degree.
And now you find yourself in Vermont, and let's talk a little bit about, what are you doing right now?
Everything.
Everything. Sounds good.
Everything. I am doing amazing things. So I graduated from Harvard in 2017. And at the time I was working, I had a fellowship at Dartmouth College working in their sustainability office. After that, I worked at a nonprofit in Montpelier, Vermont for a little while. And then I got a job as the program coordinator, and it's my current job at Vermont Law School. I work in their Institute for Energy and the Environment. Um, and I do a lot of different things in that role. I'm sort of the day to day organizer, operations, farm manager, if you will, of the Institute. And more recently, I am working on some research projects around clean transportation and electric vehicle adoption, especially in my own town of Hartford. I am also working for my graduate program at Harvard. I am a teaching assistant. I've been doing that now for 3 years, teaching technical writing to about 15 students a semester. And I am teaching yoga, and I am working as I was elected as an energy commissioner here in my town of Hartford. So I am doing this sort of beautiful confluence of all of my passions, my interests, my indulgences, and my caprices.
Right, right. That's awesome. How do you explain what sustainability means to somebody that maybe has no background in it, or hears the word thrown around a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but having someone that has an education in that field, how do you explain sustainability to somebody, and why is it so important?
So, sustainability is going to be different from whatever perspective you're viewing it from. From an environmental standpoint, sustainability is the ability to use natural resources at a rate which allow us to have them for generations to come. From a personal standpoint, sustainability is the ability to balance your work life, your personal life, your relationships equally so that you are able to lead and live a healthy and happy life. Sustainability is extremely important from an environmental standpoint, at least at the current time, because humans have been using natural resources at an alarming rate. We are continuing to use them in ways that are irresponsible and damaging. And if we want to leave a world for our children and for our children's children where they can be prosperous and live happily and healthfully, then we need to be doing better now. ultimately, and this may surprise people, but ultimately the world, the earth is going to be fine. There is no damage that we can do to it now that it can't recover from in a few thousand years. The whole point of my work is to create and extend tomorrows and make sure that the quality of life that I leave for my children, for their children, is healthy and productive. Um, so that's what sustainability, from an environmental standpoint, anyway, is
Yeah.
means to me.
If you could wave a magic wand and make one human, um, how do I want to say this? If you could change one thing that we humans are doing to
Hmm.
the earth,
Yeah,
and you could just like snap your fingers, what would that one? What would you choose that one thing to be for us to stop doing or to change?
I would change our dependence on a an oil, petroleum, and coal based energy system. So a little bit of backstory. The whole reason I am interested in energy specifically is because when it comes to an issue like climate change, the the biggest emission that humans produce is from electricity production and consumption. So, and we are still in a system that is based on the use of power plants that are powered from coal and natural gas and these unsustainable, non-renewable resources. But we can still meet our energy needs through renewables like solar power, hydropower, wind power, geothermal. These are all technologies that exist and that actually are financially more feasible in the long run. So if I could wave my magic wand, I would have every home have a solar panel on top of it. I would have everybody connected through a net metering agreement to their grid, and I would have oil and coal all remaining under the ground where it belongs.
Do you see that happening in the next 50 years in your crystal ball?
In 50, I think it's inevitable, actually.
Okay.
I think that it's going to be a very slow transition, and we can't move towards it quickly because this country was built off of
Yeah.
the coal industry, the oil industry, and we need to be very sensitive to people whose families for generations have depended upon these industries. So I think that it needs to be an equitable transition. It needs to be a just transition. And we need to bring everybody with us. But I would say within the next 50 years, I think incidences like COVID that we're going through right now prove how much this transition needs to happen and the benefits that we can enjoy having gone through it. I mean, there are studies coming out right now that are showing how much the air pollution has improved, air quality has
Yeah.
improved over major cities. We can still have that if we can get buildings running more efficiently on cleaner fuel, if we can have everybody in a hybrid or an electric vehicle, lower costs. We can have those same benefits. So 50 years in some places, yes. For the whole world, again, if I had a magic wand, I'd do it, but a little
Yeah.
more grounded, maybe a bit longer.
Well, what's in your opinion, what's one thing that the United States is doing right? I mean, most Americans are doing well in regards to sustainability
Hmm.
and environmental friendliness.
I think one of the biggest things that we're doing well is awareness. Um, it's one of the biggest things that we can do. And we are creating a case for social dilemmas to be a positive thing. So, in a sustainability view, in a social dilemma type situation, let's say it's like recycling or not recycling, you can choose to cooperate and recycle, or defect and not recycle. And there are benefits to both of those, obviously, from a time perspective, a money perspective. But as a culture, the United States is shifting towards it being cool and trendy and the right thing to cooperate. You are now cool if you have a renewable or reusable straw. you get sort of teased or perhaps ostracized if you're seen with too much plastic or non-renewables. So I am encouraged when I see these little behaviors, these little awareness campaigns adding up. People like Bernie Sanders, who had these huge have I'm going to say have these huge environmental campaigns. They're raising awareness for this. This is part of the process, is raising awareness for these issues and teaching our children well. I know that that's Crosby, Stills, and Nash had it first, but
Right.
really got to teach the children well, instill those good habits at an early age, and have a lot of hope.
This might be a tough question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Given your background, how do you handle interacting with someone that is completely, doesn't believe in any of this stuff? Doesn't
Hmm.
Not going to say they don't believe in science, but maybe they doubt about climate change. Maybe they feel that, what's my two trucks going to really make a difference when there's 300 million Americans in this country. How do you interact and engage with somebody like that? Um, because I would imagine for someone that knows so much as you do and coming from the background that you have, and it's something that you're so passionate about, it would have to be, in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, gosh, that would be probably hard for you not to just like slap the person and say, why don't you wake up? But you can't do
Can't
that.
do
Well,
it.
you can, but how do you? Because I'm sure you've run into people like that. I would imagine.
Oh yeah.
Um, how do you handle that, and how do you engage, or at least try to engage?
It's definitely hard. Um, but the first thing I do is I listen. I would want to know what they think first and find out their perspective, because the impulse to get immediately angry and stand up for what I believe is really strong, but that's just going to inflame things.
Sure.
So I would first want to find out, okay, well, why do they think what they think? Hear their story. Maybe it can come from a place of fear. Climate change denial often comes from a place of fear and a desire to not want to change. So after talking to people who are skeptical of climate change or don't want to admit that it's happening, I think from there I would not push and go back to and this is what I teach my students in my work at Harvard. You can't deny a peer-reviewed paper, and it's really great to have a couple of them up your sleeve, because nothing quite stops a climate change denier by immediately whipping out a couple of well-cited peer-reviewed papers from a well-respected journal and saying what these papers show and the science shows. And if that doesn't work, then there's nothing that you can do that's going to convince them. And your energy is better spent, and my energy is better spent teaching those who believe and who want to care. Because every person that I teach about how to construct a good argument, how to make those positive changes, is going to go out and teach a couple other people.
Right.
And I've really had to learn. And this goes back to when I was a kid and was in my homeschool group and got told horrible things because I didn't go to church and believed in evolution. You got to just turn the other cheek.
Yeah.
And again, yoga helps, and wine.
Oh, there we go. Well, that's a perfect transition because let's stop talking shop. Let's
Okay.
talk a little bit about you already mentioned that you do yoga, but
Hmm.
I know that you're also really you're a big fan of running,
Hmm.
and particularly trail running.
Yes.
Um, and I had one of my previous guests is also a runner, and we talked about why he runs and so forth. And I mentioned in that episode that it's to me it's such a foreign concept because I never got into it. I don't find any enjoyment in it. So I always like to talk to people that do run
Hmm.
and find out why do you run? And particularly talk a little bit about trail running, because I don't know, maybe not everybody that's out there listening knows what trail running is.
Sure. So I came into running only a few years ago. I had done it kind of on and off throughout my teen years and my 20s, but I hated it. It was just always painful, and I had shin splints, and it was just there was no joy in running. It was a slog. I just had to get through it. And I did it for the wrong reasons too. I did it for weight loss predominantly. And that was really unhealthy because I didn't need to lose any weight. And so it was, there was nothing healthy about my running habits. Um, and then, I guess so 2.5, almost 3 years ago, I met, my current wonderful partner, Steven. And Steven had been a runner for a long time. And a couple of our first dates were going out and running with him and his dog Banner. And so for those first few runs, I still,
That would have been a deal breaker for me right from the
oh,
start.
I still hated it, Doug. I still hated it, but
Boy,
I really liked this guy. I really liked his cute
yeah,
dog.
no, okay.
So I kept at, and Steven was the first one to introduce me to trail running. And so when I had run before meeting him, I was running on road, and again, painful, hurt, just awful. But running on trail, and especially on hills, it's an entirely different experience. So and this may seem funny because I practice yoga, and people tend to have a stereotype about people who practice yoga, but I'm a very anxious person. I mean, Doug, you've met my father. I am my father. I'm very
Yeah.
anxious. I have a brain that just never ever shuts up. Um, but when I'm trail running, you have to be so very focused on that next step. You have to just be so careful that you don't twist an ankle. You're gingerly stepping over roots and rocks and leaves, and your brain can't think about anything else. So when I'm trail running, that is the closest to a true meditation I think I can really get. And the joy is so overwhelming. It's so beautiful too, and it's hard. I mean, I've cried running on trails multiple times. I've skinned my knee. I've fallen flat on my face. But you also walk. Like I walk quite a bit when I'm trail running. You don't go super fast, but you see things when you're trail running that you don't when you run on roads. It's a great way to be in the woods, to clear your head. And I
So
yeah.
if you use running for those purposes, then what is yoga then for you? Because like a lot of people do yoga for those types of reasons.
hmm So when I do yoga, I get there a little bit as well. But also when people think of yoga, they think of like Lululemon spandex
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff, and people sitting on their heads. And I'm not that kind of yogini. So a yogi is a male person who practices yoga, and a yogini is a female. Um, but yoga is actually a philosophy. It's not a theology. It's more of a science and a way of living. The actual postures of yoga are only 1/8 of what yoga is. We have this thing called the 8 limbs of yoga, and it's a way of going through life, of being, of existing, of treating yourself, treating others. And I am working anyway on practicing all 8 of those limbs. So that the asanas, or the postures, that's only a small part of my yoga practice, and running is another part of it. Yoga, I mean, the running is more of dharana, which is one of the, I think it's it's either 6 or 7, which is this focus, this meditation, this withdrawal of the senses. So my running is very well tied into my yoga, but I also find a lot of peace in my yoga practice. I'm not, again, I don't practice daily. I don't wake up and immediately meditate for 10 minutes. I'll roll out my mat when I'm drawn to it. I also love red meat and whiskey, so I am not like your classic yogi, but my yoga practice is something that is very near and dear, and I love to share. Being a yoga teacher has been one of the greatest joys of my life, and I love sharing that gift.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you have red meat and whiskey there, I think I'll even join you in the yoga if that's the
I've
case.
often considered starting a yoga class. It'd be like yoga and then wine tasting, and I'd call it like vino and vinyasa, or let's see, I could do a Pinot and poses, or a Namaste and Chardonnay. I have all these great
Ah, so
ideas.
you've thought about all this
Oh
stuff. That's
yeah.
good. That's good. Oh yeah. Well, Molly, I usually bring all of our conversations to an end with 10 random questions for
Okay.
each guest. And I don't want you to they're not meant to make you like think deeply. It's just whatever answer comes to mind first,
Got it.
okay?
Yes.
All right, here we go. Question number 1. What is your morning drink of choice?
Coffee, black.
I didn't have to ask the follow-up. Good. Number 2, what is your go-to or who is a go-to musical artist or group?
I am a big fan of The National.
Oh, that's good. Yeah,
I
I
love The
like them
National. Seen
too.
them in concert a bunch. Love them.
Good, 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 good. What movie can you watch over and over again and it never gets old?
Zoolander. Hands down. Top 3. Ben Stiller, Owen Wilson, forever.
Someone else answered that one time too. That's good. Question number 4. What is the last thing you read?
The last thing I read, um, gosh, um, oh, I know what it is. I read the Book of Dust, which is the
Okay.
prequel to the His Dark Material series by Philip Pullman.
Oh, okay. Not familiar with it. Is it fiction?
Fiction, yes.
Okay.
I'm
All right.
reading a nonfiction book called Light on Life, which is a yogi textbook kind of thing.
Okay. Okay. Number 5. What's your favorite pizza topping?
My favorite pizza topping: onions, peppers, and chicken sausage.
Okay. This one, I think I know the answer to this one, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Okay.
Laying on the beach or going for a hike?
Going for a hike.
Yep, I knew that. Number 7. This one might be tough given our history. You invite me over for dinner.
Uh-huh.
What are you cooking?
You mean, what are we cooking?
Okay, fair enough.
And
But
I
I'll
will
let you.
I will tell
Go
you,
ahead.
because we have our next dinner engagement already planned. It's been planned for a couple of years, Doug. We're making a New England feast. We're having lobster rolls, clam chowder, Maine blueberry pie, and salad from the garden.
Uh, lovely. I'm salivating already. All right, number 8. What is a dream vacation destination of yours?
uh, I would love to go to New Zealand. Any place that's
Hmm.
got more sheep than people is good by me. I'm also a big fan of their prime minister. She's pretty cool.
She is really in the news a lot right
She's
now. Yeah.
awesome.
Yes, absolutely. Number 9. What is something that you're afraid of?
Something that I'm afraid of. Lack of change,
Okay. Ooh,
especially
that's a
in
good.
our in the environment and the political atmosphere of today, and in myself.
That's a good answer. Wow. And last question. What job, other than one that you've already had, would you love to have?
Professional potter.
They always look so calm, don't
I
they?
I I do it as a hobby. It's one of
Oh,
those
okay.
meditation things. When I'm
Yeah.
throwing on the wheel, my brain just goes off quiet. So yes,
Yeah, there
professional
you go.
potter. Oh, and also a lawyer. I'd be a lawyer.
Really? That would
Yes,
be a dream job for you.
that would be a dream
Okay.
job.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. Molly, it has been an absolute joy and pleasure to talk to you again. And I'm so thankful that you came on the podcast to share a little bit about yourself. And it was just great hearing your lovely laughter again. It's been too long. It's
It
been
really
too long.
has, Doug.
But thank you so much, Molly,
Thank
for
you, Doug.
coming
This has
on.
been a true joy.
Well, everyone, thank you for listening to Doug's Front Porch, a conversational podcast with your host, Doug Maidenford. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give it a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Doug's Front Porch. And please feel free to tell all your friends about my show. I'll see you all next time on my front porch.